Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, it's on. You can turn it off. You got Fozzie the bear here. All right, guys. It's my understanding that after tonight, there's one more night of Sukkot. But we got John a night early. And so this is his final night that he's going to be with us. So he's saved the best for last, I'm sure. And he said he wanted to start right at 7 o'clock because he had a lot of good stuff that he had found. So without further ado, we're going to let him get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, for one last time for Sukkot this year, John Costick. Well, starting at exactly at 7, that was one reason, but also there's the Green Acres Marathon starting at 9:30 tonight. I got Yes. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about Esther, and you'll notice I have it on the screen. Do you find it hard to see? Yeah, you know why? Because the word Esther in Hebrew means hidden. And because so much is hidden in the book of Esther, you kind of got to read all the verses to find all the stuff. So there's going to be a lot of reading. I'm going to try to read fast on some of these verses. What's happening? Why is it? Oh, okay. In the Hebrew Old Testament, you know, it's made up of 3 sections. It's the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. Then you have the Nevi'im, and those are all the prophets. I think there's 12 minor and 7 major. And then you have the Ketuvim. By the way, the word Nevi in Hebrew means prophet. So the Nevi'im, those are the prophets. And then the Ketuvim, those are the writings. Okay?
And the Jews, if you tell them, well, look in the Old Testament. Well, they don't know Old Testament because they don't have a New Testament, right? They call the Old Testament Tanakh. Why Tanakh? They take the letters T from Torah, N from Nevi'im, K from Ketuvim, Tanakh. Got it? And in the Ketuvim, there's a section called the Megalot. This is the scrolls. There's 5 of them, okay? Ruth, Esther, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Lamentations. The scroll of Esther, and Megillah is, the Megalot is plural, it's a feminine, and one is the Megillah. The Megillah is the Hebrew word for scroll, okay? So this is the scroll of Esther is referenced in the Torah. Really now. And by the way, instead of scroll of Esther, you could say the Megillah of Esther, right? Because that's scroll. And it turns out, I told you there were 5 Megalot. Esther is such, it is the ultimate Megillah, that in Hebrew, whenever they talk about the Megillah, you don't even have to ask which one. Megillah just means Esther, even though the other ones are Megillot also, okay? So you could say the Megillah is referenced in the Torah, okay? And then you wouldn't have to ask, which Megillah? No, Megillah is Esther. But in Deuteronomy 31:18, it says, "But I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evil which they will do, for they will turn to other gods." Here is where it's hidden. The word Hester, it's a Hey, Samek, Tav, Resh, Hester. And then you have it kind of again. You have Aleph, Samek, Tav, Yod, Resh. And if you try to pronounce that, it's Esther or Astir. Okay? It's almost like it's being repeated, right? And whenever God repeats a word, it's extra emphasis, okay? You'll see it in a couple examples. Whenever God told Abraham, "Go to the land I will show you," that's Genesis 12:1. He says, because the word go is lek, but he don't say lek. He says leka. He's repeating it. When you're repeating it, it's emphasis. Go, okay? Another one is, I think it's in Leviticus. The middle of the Torah, the middle words of the Torah is Darosh. Darosh means to seek or search for. And he says Darosh, Darash. They pronounce the second one a little bit different, but it's the same word twice. And that means don't just seek diligently. I mean, really find, okay? So anytime a word is repeated, and here you have astir, which means hide, hidden, but it's kind of repeated. So it's surely hide, absolutely with emphasis. And we know from Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of Elohim to conceal a matter and the glory of kings to search it out. So he's got stuff hidden in here. We're going to search it out. Is it hot? I'm warm. Is it? You're hot too? Yeah, just enough to kick it on. Okay. Now, the name Esther is a Hebrew name. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah. There it is. And it means myrtle, as in a myrtle plant, tree. But because she's in Persia, and she wasn't supposed to let them know that she's a Jew, they gave her a Persian name. The Persian name is Esther. And in Persian, the word Esther means star. Okay, so it does mean star in the Persian language. But it just so happens that that word, Esther, in Hebrew, it's a Persian word, but it sounds like the Hebrew word Esther, which is hidden. Make sense? Okay. And the book of Esther does not mention God, as far as we know. But because it means hidden, he might be hidden in there. Okay. It took place in the day of Ahasuerus, and that's the name that it's in the Hebrew, but they say that that guy is Xerxes. And I'll probably just use the name Xerxes because it's easier to pronounce. In the day of Xerxes, the Xerxes who reigned from India to Cush, over 127 provinces. From India to Cush, here's Persia today. So his kingdom went from India, and Cush is Ethiopia, Sudan, below Egypt. So he had a big empire, all right? In those days, as King Xerxes sat on the royal throne, which was at the citadel in Susa. Susa would have been in Persia. And Susa we know from Daniel. Because Daniel, as I looked in the vision, while I was looking, I was in the citadel in Susa. So Daniel was in Susa. Remember, the Jews were taken to Babylon, and then the Persians took them to Persia. So Susa is a common. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the princes and attendants and army officers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of his province being in his presence. In that verse, here it is in the Hebrew, you'll notice that if you start here at this mem and count 8 letters, you get a shin, count 8, you get a yod, count 8, you get a chet, and it spells Mashiach every 8. That's okay. It's not earth-shattering. I mean, I'm sure if you had Moby Dick, you could find something every 8 letters apart. But he did have that hidden in there. And the Messiah, 8 is Jesus' number, right? It's new beginnings. Jesus' name in Greek adds up to 888. He displayed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his great majesty for many days, 180 days. That's a long party. When the days were completed, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Susa. So after finishing the 180-day party, then he threw a 7-day party banquet. Keep that in mind. You'll see at the end it's going to come. And he says there were hangings of white and violet linen, purple cords, silver rings, marble columns, gold, silver. So he's decked the place out. Mother of pearl. Drinks were served in golden vessels. The royal wine was plentiful according to the king's bounty. The drink was done according to the law. There was no compulsion, for so the king had given orders to each official of his household that he should do according to the desires of each person. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the palace, which belonged to King Xerxes. This is what you're waiting for, but I've not got much. But there is a big picture of this, and that is each of these characters that we're going to see in the Esther story do have kind of a parallel to the big story. King Xerxes might be the God character here, okay? He has a bride, Vashti, and he's throwing a party, and he's telling them, you may drink as you please. You want to drink a lot? Drink a lot. Drink a little? Drink a little. God does not force anything on us, and the king is not forcing anything on the people, okay? That's how I read that. On the 7th day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he commanded these 7 people who served in the presence of the king to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and princes, for she was beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. And the king became very angry, and his wrath burned within him. So Vashti, she's going to represent somebody, right? And this may be premature, but I think she might represent the Jews, because God threw a party and invited the Jews to come, and they didn't come. So keep that in mind, because that might play. It's going to play. Yes, it is playing. Okay. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for it was the custom of the king, so to speak, before all who knew law and justice. By the way, the king said to the wise men who understood the times. Then he named 7 of those wise men. There they are. According to the law, what should be done to Queen Vashti because she did not obey the king? They're debating what he should do for her not coming. And the wise men who understood the times. You know where I see those? Issachar, yes, Issachar is known for that. But where you really see it in Matthew 2, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem in the days of Herod the king, Magi is the word for wise men, okay, from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is he born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, we've come to worship him. Why did these wise men from the east, where in the east? I don't know. I think they came from Persia. The reason I think that is because Daniel was taken captive to Babylon, and then he was raised with all the wise men. And then when the Persians took over, they took Daniel to Persia. And Daniel, he's explaining to all the wise men, hey, here's the prophecies. They saw Daniel's prophecies. They know the 70-week prophecy, and they knew that this Messiah was supposed to come in 70 weeks, or 69 weeks. And so when it was getting close, they said, hey, it's about time for Daniel's been long dead, but they had his records. So they're reading, oh, it's time for the Messiah. Let's go. So these wise men that are in the Esther story, they are the wise men. The descendants of them are the ones who went to look for Jesus as a baby. In the presence of the king and the princes, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but all the princes and the peoples who are in the provinces. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands by saying, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in his presence, but she did not come. This is a big problem, right? If it gets word out that the king demanded and she didn't come. This day, the ladies of Persian media who have heard the queen's conduct will speak in the same way to all the king's princes, and there'll be plenty of contempt and anger. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the law, so it cannot be ordered. Once the king makes a decree, it cannot be changed. That Vashti shall come no more before the king, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So Vashti is out. And that's not the first time somebody got kicked out. Remember Saul, and Samuel said to Saul, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, has given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you. So it's not unbiblical that someone gets the kingdom ripped out from them, or the queendom. The king's edict, which he will make his heard throughout all his kingdom, great as it is, then all women will give honor to their husbands, great and small. There's the order that's being sent out. In that verse, this is verse 20 of chapter 1 of Esther, he has, here it is, here's the Melech, king, yada, yada, yada. And down here, I have 4 words. And notice those 4 words. This one begins with a yod. The one before it begins with a hey. The one before it begins with a vav. And the one before it begins with a hey. So Yahweh's name is kind of hidden in 4 words. It's hidden backwards with the first letters of each word. You see that? Okay. So it's backwards and first letters. Okay. This word pleased the king, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the provinces in their languages explaining women have to respect their husbands. Chapter 2, after these things, after the anger subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. That's an important verse, because if Vashti truly represents the Jews, look what it says. And then the king remembered Vashti. Whenever the Jews rejected Jesus, did God write them off forever? No. He's going to remember the Jews. After the fullness of the Gentiles come in, he turns back to the Jews. So that's kind of what's happened here. You can see that picture. Okay, the king remembered Vashti. A little phrase, but it might have a lot of prophetic significance in it. The king's attendants who served him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king." And the king oversaw, and he sent out, and they brought in all the pretty girls and put them in the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of all women, and let the cosmetics be given to them. Then the young lady who pleases the king will be the queen in place of Vashti, and the matter pleased the king, and he did accordingly. Good. Now, there are four verses in the book of Esther that whenever they are read, the entire congregation reads them together aloud. This is just Jewish tradition. We're not Jewish, but let's do it. Verse 5. Now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Okay, that's all you have to do. Huh? Just that verse. Just 5 is read, and there'll be 3 others coming up throughout the talk. This Mordecai, he had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with captives who had been exiled, with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. Okay? So, you got it? Next one. I went backwards. This King Jeconiah that they brought. Here is another place where God, he might be hidden, but he's here. Because it says King Jeconiah. Jeconiah ends in Yah. So there's God. He's there. Okay? And Jeconiah means something is established. Yah has established. This Mordecai fella, he was bringing up Hadassah. That is Esther. Here's the first mention of Esther's name in the Bible. Okay, I put a little 1 there so you can see that. His uncle's daughter. This is Mordecai's uncle's daughter. They're first cousins. How often have you heard or read that Mordecai was Esther's uncle? That's just what I always grew up hearing, but it's not. They're cousins. He's much older than her, but they're cousins. Okay? Now, the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it's uncle's daughter, okay? So it's either Mordecai's mother's brothers or father's brothers. It's a first cousin, not an uncle. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai, that Esther, second time mentioned, was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. This Haggai guy, look at his name. It's Hey Gimel Yod. Right? And we know that in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph is the father, Bet is the son, Gimel is the spirit. So that Gimel in the middle of his name could represent the son. And what letters are around the Gimel? It's Yud Hey. So somebody is this guy, Haggai, he's got to be somebody in the picture. I think he is the Holy Spirit. Because the king, the Jews, Vashti, rejected the king's invitation, right? And so now he's calling for a new bride. This would be when Jesus came, the Jews rejected him, and now he turns it over to the Gentiles. And who prepares we Gentiles for our marriage with Yeshua? The Holy Spirit, right? So I think that's who this is a picture of. It's the Spirit of God. He's the one who's in charge of all the women to prepare them to go in to see the king. Nice. Now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with cosmetics, food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace. Okay, good stuff, good stuff. Esther, third time mentioned, did not make known to her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known that she was Jewish. Every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and how she fared. Okay? Who's Mordecai in this picture? It gets a little fuzzy here, so I'm not 100% sure. Sometimes Mordecai is a Jesus character. Sometimes we know he's Jewish, right? And this verse got me stumped a little bit right here. Every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court to learn how Esther was. And today the Jews, they don't go looking for Jesus talk, but their ears are listening. When I go to Israel, we're flipping through. They have a Christian channel, and there's Hal Lindsey's show comes on. And my Jewish friends, they're like, oh yeah, we've seen this guy. It kind of reminds me of Mordecai walking past, listening to see what's happening with Esther. In fact, who was? Oh, it was my friend Reuben. He had some problems where he was staying, and it was his power got cut off. And I said, "Listen, Reuben, come over to my house and just sleep on the couch, because it was summer and it's Houston. It's 110 degrees and it's just miserable." He was sleeping on the floor, and I said, "No, come over, and bring your laundry, and we'll throw it in my machine." So when he comes over, I put on Hal Lindsey. And which I was going to watch anyway. I said, I didn't just with Bible videos, but I did put on that one. And he just happened to be talking about Ezekiel, and about halfway through, Reuben says, "Well, is this the Jewish channel?" I said, "No." Now, when the turn of each young lady came to go into the king, after the end of her 12 months of preparing, under the regulations of the women, for the days of their beautification were completed, 6 months for this and 6 months for that, the young lady would go into the king in this way. Anything that she desired was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. So she gets to choose what she wants to take in there. In the evening, she would go in the morning, she would return to the second harem, to the custody of Shahagaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go again into the king unless he was delighted in her and summoned by her name. When it was Esther's turn, look here, 5th mention of Esther. When it was Esther's turn, the daughter of Abihail, so we know who her mother is, the uncle of Mordecai, Abihail must be a guy. The uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, came in to go to the king. She did not request anything except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the woman, advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. That's nice that she's depending on the Holy Spirit. Whatever you think I need, that's what I need. I don't need anything extra. That's a nice picture there. Okay, and notice here's the 5th mention of Esther's name. And on your paper here, what does 5 represent? 5 is, hey, blessings, grace, revelation's coming, right? Big stuff is coming. And grace, by the way, is the word that captures it. Grace is the same as favor, okay, showing favor. And you'll notice in this verse, it says, and Esther found favor. The 5th time Esther's name is mentioned, it's in a verse where she finds favor. And you think, well, that's clever. But it turns out there are 5 people in the Bible whose 5th mention of their name, they find favor. The first one, there's 5, favor. Back up. And Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. That's the 5th mention of Noah's name. Very nice. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, please let me go in the field and glean among the ears of grain after one in whose sight I may find favor. And she said, go, my daughter. That's the 5th mention of Ruth's name. Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David now stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. 5th mention of David. Esther, we already said. And in Daniel 1:9 is the 5th mention of Daniel. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of all the commanders of the officials. And that's interesting, 5, and there's only 5 people who this happens to. And if you go home tonight and look up the Daniel reference, you can count it 100 times, and you're going to say, that rat caustic, he said it was the 5th time, but there's only 4th time that Daniel's name is mentioned that it says he found favor. And this bothered me for days, because I read somewhere that it's true, and then I tried to count, and then I checked it on King James, I checked it on NIV, I checked it in and it was always the 4th mention, it says found favor. And then it dawned on me. Because before the 5th mention on the Daniel one, he gets his name changed to Belshazzar. And you have to count that one, because that is Daniel's name. If you count that one, then the 5th Daniel, or the 5th time, his name is mentioned. Which name? He's got 2. You got to count the other one. No. No, it's just somewhere in the passage. Just look for his name, and each time you find one, add them up. When you get the 5th one, he finds favor. Okay, so Esther was taken to the king. It tells you when, 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the women. She found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet. Okay, here's another banquet. We already had 2 banquets, remember? We had the big 180-day banquet, and then we had a 7-day banquet, and now we're having a wedding banquet. You're going to notice there's a lot of food in this book. Then the king, for all the princes and his servants, he also made a holiday and give gifts according to the king's bounty. Marriage between Jews and Gentiles is not allowed in Orthodox Judaism, but there is a special rule they have, and this is what it's called, Pikuach Nefesh. It's watching over a soul, and they don't consider Esther a sinner by marrying this king, because one, she didn't volunteer to do it. She didn't go running toward it. She was kind of forced into it, okay? And it turned out she ended up risking her life to save the Jews, so they don't consider her a sinner for marrying this guy. When the virgins were gathered together the 2nd time, then Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known to her kindred or people that she was Jewish. Okay. In those days, Mordecai was sitting at the king. This is a little side story we have going on. Mordecai is sitting at the king's gate, and these 2 guys, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the officials who guarded the door, became angry and sought to lay hands on the king. But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when the plot was investigated and found to be true, both of these guys were hanged on a gallows, and they were written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. So a little side note, Mordecai overhears a plot to kill the king. He reports to Esther. Esther tells the king. The king hangs these 2 guys, and they write it in the history book. This, if you know the story of Esther, you know all this already. Okay. After these events, Xerxes promoted Haman. Boo. We don't like to mention his name. We have it scratched out. Blotted out. And this Haman guy, he's the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes. So this Haman fella is promoted to number 2 in Persia. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?" So Haman, he wants everybody to bow down to him. Mordecai refuses, and it's getting Mordecai in a little bit of trouble here. And they would ask him daily why he's not doing that, and to see whether Mordecai's used to stand, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage, he was filled with rage. But he was disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. He wanted to destroy all of the Jews and all the people of Mordecai throughout the whole kingdom. Okay, so he's really ticked off that he's not getting whatever honor he thinks he's deserving. Esther 3:7, in the first month, in the 12th year, per is a lot, like a dice, a die. And plural is purim. It's like he took dice and threw them to pick a day when he could destroy the Jews. Okay? That is a lot, was cast before Haman from day to day, month to month, until the 12th month, which is Adar. So here, that's how he chose the day we're going to kill the Jews. Okay? And this Purim, that's where we get the name Purim, which is the holiday like in February. Okay? And the Jews have turned a little bit into almost like a Halloween. I was actually in Israel at Purim once, and the streets were just full of people, and they're in all kind of costumes. Yeah, at the church service, they usually dress up like Esther or the king or Haman, and they read the scroll. But those kind of secular ones, they're dressed like all kind of crazy things out partying in the streets. Haman says to the king, there's a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people. They don't observe the king's laws, and it's not in the king's interest to retain them. This is good here. Watch this 9. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put in the king's treasury. So Haman, he's so upset with this Mordecai not bowing. I'll give you 10,000 talents of silver, king, if you let me kill all the Jews. And the king responds, and the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the silver is yours. Keep your money. And the people also, and do with them at your pleasure. So the king doesn't know that who he wants to kill, that it's the Jews, nor does he know that his wife Esther is a Jew. Okay, now here is that verse, number 11 in the Hebrew. And here's something very clever, you'll see. Right here, if you start with this hey, this is Hamelech, the king. That would be that red king here, is the purple here. Start at the hey and count 6 letters, you get a mem. And count 6 letters, you get a noon. And that spells Haman every 6 letters. Nice. And if you continue 6 more, you get a vav. And vav means and. And if you continue 6 more, you get a shin, and then a tet, and then another noon. So you have Haman and Satan. And if you count 6 more, it spells the word stink. which is kind of clever. No, it's very clever. But there it is, and it's 6 letters apart. And the 666, that ties in nicely with Satan. And Haman is a type of Antichrist, right? Get rid of the Jews. Uh-oh, what happened there? Then the king's scribes were summoned. We don't want to read all this. It was this order to kill these people was sealed by the ring. Letters were sent to destroy, kill, annihilate all the Jews, old, young, women. And it was supposed to be done in the month of Adar. And then they got to seize the possessions as plunder. What happened? What happened? The copy was published for all to read. Couriers sent it over the whole place. While the king and Haman sat down to drink, the city of Susa was in confusion. Okay? Chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, went out in the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. He went as far as the king's gate, for no one was to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. In that verse, we have El Shaddai is every 7th letter. Where does it start here? I get here. Aleph, count 7. Lamed, count 7. Shin, Dalet, Yod. So El Shaddai is every 7 letters. El Shaddai is the God Almighty. El Shaddai is Almighty. Each and every province where the command and decree of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, fasting, weeping, wailing, sackcloth and ashes. Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her. The queen writhed in anguish. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai that he might remove the sackcloth, but he did not accept them. Esther summoned Hathach from the king's eunuchs and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that happened and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay for the destruction of the Jews. He gave him a text of the edict that everyone was supposed to be destroyed. Hathach returned and related Mordecai's words to Esther. Esther spoke to Hathach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. So Esther and Mordecai are talking back and forth through this guy. All the king's servants and people, no one is allowed to enter the king's presence unless they're called upon. And when they do enter, he has to offer the golden scepter, and then they may grasp at it and they're accepted. So, and if he doesn't, off with your head, okay? So, the king holds out the golden scepter. I haven't been summoned for 30 days. Esther hadn't been summoned again, so she's not sure what status she is. They related Esther's words to Mordecai. Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the other Jews." Because it's the king's edict, everybody has to get it. This is the big verse here. "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have attained royalty for such a time as this." Okay, so Esther, you got to go in and talk to the king, because you're going to lose if you don't, right? Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat, drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way, and thus I will go to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded. So it was interesting. Fast for 3 days. She didn't say pray. She didn't say pray to God. Remember, God's not mentioned in this book. Okay? So, chapter 5. Now it came about on the 3rd day that we're going very fast here, but I want to try to get it read in the first hour, because the second hour is all the interpretations, and you're going to love it. It came about on the third day that Esther put on royal robes, stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's rooms, and the king was sitting on his royal throne. When the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. The king extended the golden scepter, which was in his hand. Esther came and touched the top of the scepter. Whew. The king said to you, "What is troubling you, Queen Esther? And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be given to you." Esther says, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to a banquet that I have prepared for him." Oh, we got another banquet. This is our fourth, right? In that fourth verse, if you take that verse, look here, start right here. I have a yod begins this word. I have a hey that begins that word, a vav that begins this word, and a hey that begins this word. So we have Yahweh's name again. This time it's going forward. The last time we saw it going backwards. They were first letters going backwards. These are first letters going forward. Make sense? Okay. So God is in Esther. He's hidden. And he was in Jeconiah's name. The king said, I was going to take a drink. I had it ready. I had it in my hand. I had it up to my lips, and I didn't take it. Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that we may do as Esther desires." So the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. As they drank their wine at the banquet, the king said to Esther, "What is your petition? For it shall be granted, even to half of my kingdom." Esther replied, "My petition and request is, if I found favor in your sight of the king, if it pleases the king to grant my petition and do what I request, may the king and Haman come to a banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king says." So she invited him to a banquet, and they came to the banquet, and then she invited them to a banquet. Seems odd, doesn't it? Well, maybe. So here, Esther said, "If it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to a banquet that I have prepared for him." And then the king and Haman go to a banquet. And then, so Esther replied, "My petition is, if I have found favor, come to a banquet that I prepared." And then the king and Haman go to a banquet. There's a repeat here, right? That's odd. Okay? But it's going to be explained soon. And as soon as it's explained to me, I will explain it to you. No, but it makes me question it with right? Because what's she doing here? Then Haman went out, they all glad and pleased of heart. Boo. And when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, he did not stand up or tremble before him. Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Haman controlled himself, went to his house, and sent for his friends and his wife, Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches, the number of sons, and every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had promoted him above princes and servants of the king. Brag, 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 brag. He also said, "Even Esther the queen, let no one but me come with the king to the banquet, which she had prepared. And tomorrow also I'm invited by her with the king. Yet all of this does not satisfy me even every time I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate. He can have the whole world, and one Jew upsets him." We watched a movie the other night, The Count of Monte Cristo. And you had the nobleman's son who had everything, and the other guy is the son of a clerk. And they were best friends. And the nobleman's son, he betrays him and wants to have him killed. And then the son's like, why? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? We're best friends. He said, because I'm the son of a nobleman, and you're the son of a clerk, and I shouldn't want to be you. That kind of reminds me of Haman here, right? Yeah. Look, we got another one. This is verse 13. Now I have 4 words that the last letter is Yod, the last letter is Hey, the last letter is Vav, the last letter is Hey. So I've got Yahweh now. With the first time we saw it, the first 2 times, it was reading forward, first letters and last letters. Now it's reading backwards, last letters. Okay? Can you guess what's going to be next? The next one's going to be, it's going to be backwards, first letters. Okay. This is big. Then Zeresh, Haman's wife, and all his friends said to him, have a gallows built 50 cubits high, and ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. And the advice pleased Haman, so he had the gallows built. Huh? The 50? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, chapter 6. During the night, the king couldn't sleep, so he gave orders to bring the Chronicles and be read before. And it was found in the reading that Mordecai had reported the 2 gate men who were going to lay hands on the king. The king said, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? Then the king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. So Mordecai has never been rewarded. So the king said, who's in the court right now? And Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows which he had prepared for him. It is. The king's servant said to him, behold, Haman is standing in the court, and the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for the man whom the king desires to honor? And Haman thinks it's him. So Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? So Haman goes on and gives him a laundry list of all these wonderful things to do. And he says, let him bring a royal robe which the king has worn, and the horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown has been placed. Let the robe and the horse be handed over to one of the king's noble princes. Let them array the man whom the king desires to honor, and lead him on horseback through the city square. Proclaim before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. And Haman's going like, yes. Then the king said to Haman, take quickly the robes and the horse as you have said, and do so for Mordecai the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything of all that you have said. So Haman took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. This Mordecai could be a Jesus type, because Jesus was led through the city on a donkey, and soon after, the crowds turned against him and wanted him killed. And Mordecai got the guy who wants to have him killed, leading him through the city on a horse. So there could be a parallel there, because Mordecai is Jewish. He's the good guy in this. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home, mourning with his head covered. Now, look at 13. 13 is huge. Haman recounted to Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh his wife said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. There's some good advice. Okay? While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hastily brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. That verse 13, where she's warning him, listen, if there are Jews involved, you ain't going to win. It kind of reminds me of the New Testament, Matthew 16. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. You know, if God blesses the Jews and they're supposed to win, they're going to win. And that's kind of what Zeresh is telling Haman, her husband. You know, you can't fight that. Yeah, she told him. Yeah, I think she's now realized, because now he's come back and told a new story. I just had to parade this guy through the... So now she's saying, there's something about these Jews. Chapter 7. Now the king and Haman came to drink wine with Esther the queen. And the king said to Esther on the second day, also as they drank their wine at the banquet, what is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request, even to half of my kingdom? Then the Queen Esther replied, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and it pleases the king, let my life be given me as my petition, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be annihilated. Now, if we had only been sold as slaves, men and women, I would have remained silent, for the trouble would not be commensurate with the annoyance to the king. Then the king asked Queen Esther, who is he and where is he? Who would presume to do this? In that verse 5, it does spell out I am, every third letter. So God is in here, okay? Esther said, a foe and an enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman became terrified before the king and the queen. The king arose in his anger from drinking wine and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, for she saw that harm had been determined against him by the king. In this verse, 7:7, here's 7:7 in Hebrew, and notice you have the last letter of this word is Yod, the last letter is Hey, Vav, Hey. So we have forward first letters. No, forward last letters. I hope we had it every way. Yes, in the first letters you have Esther 1:20 and 5:4. They're using the first letters. And then using the last letters, Esther's 5:13 and 7:7. And those are the only four possibilities in the book of Esther. Okay? So he has it going every which way. So God is hidden. Okay? Now, when the king returned from the palace garden into the place where he was drinking wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. The king said, will he even assault the queen with me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Yeah, notice Haman's covering his head here, okay? Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs who were before the king, said, behold, indeed, the gallows standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. The king said, hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows, which he had prepared for Mordecai, and the king's anger subsided. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to the queen, Esther. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had disclosed what he was to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken away from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king, fell at his feet, wept, and implored him to avert the evil scheme of Haman the Agagite and his plot which he had devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter to Esther. Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, and if I have found favor, and the matter seems proper to the king, and I am pleasing in his sight, let it be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who were in the king's provinces." The problem is, you can't undo an edict. For how can I endure, Esther says, to see calamity which will befall my people, and how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? By the way, if you read through Esther, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times it's mentioned, destroy the Jews. There they all are. Look, how can I see this destruction? Wrote to destroy the Jews, sold out for destruction. Its destruction shows up 8 times. That's interesting. But look at these 8 verses. 8 times there are verses that the Jews were allowed to fight back. The Jews killed and destroyed 500. They killed the 10 sons. The number of those killed in the citadel. So 8 times the Jews are called to be destroyed, and 8 times the Jews are verses to fight back. There's order involved here, okay? No. Oh, I don't think he said that. No, he had people wiping out whole people. Yeah. Yeah, don't murder, but you can. Okay, Esther 8:6. For how can I endure to see calamity? I already read this one. 7. So King said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jew, "Behold, I have given the house of Haman to Esther, and him and they have hanged on the gallows because he had stretched out his hand against the Jews." And now he's telling them, now you write to the Jews as you see fit in the king's name and seal it with the king's ring, for a decree which is written to the king and sealed with his signet ring may not be revoked. So the first edict was kill all the Jews, but they're going to send out another edict that Jews can fight back. He can't undo the first edict, but he can add an edict that Jews get to fight back. Verse 9. Look at this one. Anyone? So the king's scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, that which is Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded the Jews, the satraps, the governors, the princes of the provinces, which extended from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to every province according to its script, and to every people according to their language, as well as to the Jews according to their script and their language. You know what's famous about that verse? It's the longest verse in the Bible. Yes. Thank you. So it's the only claim to fame of the verse, but it happens to be it. And we all know the shortest verse, Jesus wept. So, speaking of longest and shortest, this is kind of off topic, but the shortest sentence in the English language, you have to have a subject, you have to have a verb, right? So the shortest sentence in the English language is, I am. Isn't that nice? Because you got a subject and a verb. The longest sentence in the English language is when you say, I do. Okay. So I've been told. Who is? Okay. He wrote in the name of the king and sealed it with the king's signet ring and sent letters by couriers on horses riding on steed, sired by the royal stud. Oh. Sorry, I got those pictures mixed up. Okay. We're losing control of this crowd.
You're so vain. I bet you think this song is about you.
Okay. Verse 11. In them the king granted the Jews who were in each and every city the right to assemble and to defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, annihilate the entire army of any people or province which might attack them, including children, women, and plunder their spoil, on one day in the provinces of the king, the 13th day of the 12th month. Copy received from the couriers. So the copy was written, the couriers hastened, impelled by the king's command, went out riding on the royal steeds, and the decree was given out in the citadel in Susa. This is one we all read together. Ready? Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal robes of blue and white, with a large crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. Wait, 16. For the Jews there was light and gladness and joy and honor. All right? And in each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many among the people of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. So things have turned around here for the Jews. Chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, king's edict about to be executed. On that day, the enemy of the Jews hoped to gain mastery over them. It was turned to the contrary, so that the Jews themselves gained the mastery over those who hated them. Notice here, it was turned. See that word there? Keep it in mind. The Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces to lay hands on those who sought them harm, and no one could stand before them, for the dread of them had fallen on all the people. Even all the princes of the provinces, the satraps, who were doing the king's business, assisted the Jews because the dread of Mordecai had fallen on them. Indeed, Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai became greater and greater. Thus the Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying, and they did as they pleased to those who hated them. Now, in the Torah, over to the Torah, in the Tanakh, in this scroll, it lists the 10 sons of Haman. And it says, at the city in Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. And when the Jews read this scroll, I'm not going to read these names right yet, but okay, 500 men and 10 names. The 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hammedatha, the Jews' enemy, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. When the Jews read this page, these 10 names, they read them all in one breath. Okay? That's just it's not biblical, it's just a Jewish tradition. So we're going to try it here. And Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aridatha, Parmashtha, Arisai, Aradai, and Vizatha. And they do it in one single breath because they all died together, okay? And they don't want to appear gloating over their fate and just dragging out their names, okay? So that's just kind of tradition. And if you've seen a Torah scroll or any, it's written so many characters across, and it's justified, right, both sides. But there's one page in the Tanakh where it's not like that. This is what it looks like. They just have two columns, okay? And remember, Hebrews reads this way, right? So when you come up to verse 7, here's verse 7 starts. And we're going to read this way. What's that word? Va'et. Remember, you always put et in front of, okay, and the vav is and. So it's and Parshandatha, and Aleph Tav, Dalphon, and Aleph Tav, Aspartha. You see how it works? And that's how the page looks. There's nothing else on that page. Isn't that interesting that they write it with just those 10 names on it? And you may also notice in those 10 names that some letters are written little. You see here, here's a little tav. Here's a little shin. Here's a little zayin. And they have a really big vav. So there's 4 letters on that page that are the wrong size, which might be there to tell us something. On that day, the number of those who were killed at the citadel in Susa was reported to the king. Now, this is odd here. The king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and the 10 sons of Haman at the citadel in Susa. So what did she just tell them? 500 people killed and Haman's 10 sons. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It shall be granted to you. And what is your further request? It shall also be done. King says, Esther, I just killed 500 of your enemy, and I've killed the 10 sons of Haman. We hanged them. Now, my dear, what can I do for you? And she said, then said Esther, if it pleases the king, let tomorrow also be granted to the Jews who are in Susa to do according to the edict of today. Let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the gallows. Woman, did you hear what I just said to you? I just told you the 10 sons were hanged. And now you're asking for the 10 sons to be hanged. That's as odd as that other thing we... Remember there was a question mark we had. I forget what it was, but right? Yeah, something's not right there. Now look here. See, I put question marks there. So the king commanded that it should be done so, and an edict was issued in Susa, and Haman's 10 sons were hanged. That's odd. The Jews who were in Susa assembled also on the 14th day of the month, Adar, and killed 300 men in Susa, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's province assembled to defend their lives and rid themselves of their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not lay hands on their plunder. This was done on the 13th day of Adar. On the 14th day they rested, and the 14th day they rested and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. But the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th and 14th of the same month, and they rested on the 15th day and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Notice we've got some are feasting on the 13th, 14th, and then you have a small group in Susa who's doing it on the 15th. That's important, you'll see. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas who lived in the rural towns make the 14th day of the holiday the 14th day of the month of Adar, a holiday for rejoicing and fasting and sending portions of food to one another. Okay, here we have chiastic gastroenterology. I know. I kind of made these words up. Well, it's a real thing. A chiasm, we talked about chiasms in the past. I'm going to show you one. Okay, this is the big one here. And gastroenterology is food, digestive. It has to do with food, okay? Notice, at the beginning of this, we had Xerxes. He threw a 180-day feast throughout his empire. And after the 180-day feast, what did he do? He threw a little 7-day feast for the people in Susa. Okay? Then, whenever the king and Esther got married, there was a feast in celebration of Esther's ascension. Remember, I pointed it out. I said, remember this, there's another feast here. Okay? Then, we have Esther's first feast for the king and Haman. And what did she request at her feast? Another feast. Okay? And then they had a feast in celebration of the reversal of the edict. And now that it's all over, the Feast of Purim for the Jews throughout the empire, unless you're in Susa, then you have another extra day for the... So do you see a pattern in the feasting of Esther? No? Yes? Everything seems to be double, doesn't it? Whatever happened up here, there's a big one and a small. Here's a big one and a small. These match up. These match up. Okay? That's called a chiasm. Whenever they match up, these match up, these match up, these match up, these match up. That's in English grammar, a chiasm. Okay? Then Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day and the 15th day of the same month, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and it was the month which was turned. It was a month which was turned. I asked you to point out turned earlier. Them from sorrow into gladness and from mourning into holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing and sending portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. So they got to do three things. Here are the requirements for Purim. Today, the Megillah is read from a scroll. You don't read it from a book. The Megillah is read while standing. The Megillah is read twice. They read it in the evening and they read it the next morning of Purim. And three other mitzvahs should be done on Purim. They are to enjoy a feast, send food gifts to one another, and distribute gifts to the poor. That's what that last verse said. So even today, these are what has to happen. And I was visiting my friend Reuben years ago, and it was Purim, and a Jewish man, friend of his, beard down to here and the curls and the hat and the whole thing, he came and brought Reuben a big plate of food, and it was that's what you do on Purim, you know. Okay. And here's where we got those three requirements. Make feast, send food, send gifts. Okay? Thus the Jews undertook what they had started to do and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the adversary of all the Jews, had schemed against the Jews and cast pur, that is a lot, to disturb them and destroy them. But when it came to the king's attention, he commanded by letter that this wicked scheme which he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. It's just kind of recapping what's happened. Therefore, these days are called Purim, after the name Pur. And because of these instructions in this letter, both what they had seen in this regard and what happened to them, the Jews established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all those who allied themselves with them, so they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days according to the regulation and according to their appointed time annually. And the Jews today still celebrate Purim, okay? It's in February. So these days are to be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, every family, every province, every city. And these days of Purim were not to fail from among the Jews or their memory fade from their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter about Purim. He sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces to establish Purim. The command of Esther established these customs for Purim, and it was written in the book. Okay. Purim, by the way, is a Jewish holiday, but it's not a moed. If you know what the moedim are, back in Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of heaven to separate day from night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years." Seasons is a bad, wrong translation. The word in Hebrew is moedim. Moedim is an appointed time of the Lord where God wants to meet with mankind. A lot of people will hear these names and think, oh, these are Jewish holidays. But in Genesis 1:14, there were no Jews. There were no people. And these are days that God is setting up, and he wants us to meet with him. Fortunately, the Jews do keep these days. They don't keep them exactly as he wanted, maybe, but at least, okay. So the Moedim are these appointed times of the Lord, or holy convocations of the Lord. You've heard of them: Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Shavuot, Feast of Trumpets, Atonement, and Sukkot, which we're about to wind up. Okay? So those are the 7 Moedim. They must be important. He put all 7 of them in Leviticus 23. They're all 7 found there. And Esther, this Purim, is not one of those 7. Okay? Purim, there's Purim. And the other one that's not a moed is Hanukkah. Okay? But they do celebrate these 2 days. Hanukkah and Purim, not Moedim. Here are the Moedim. And the Moedim, by the way, are very prophetic. Passover they were supposed to keep Passover. That's the day Jesus died. Unleavened bread is the burial. The first fruits is his resurrection. Shavuot is Pentecost, where the Holy Spirit was sent. Yom Teruah is the Feast of Trumpets. Yom Kippur is atonement. Sukkot is tabernacles. Those last 3 are also prophetic. Yom Teruah, I believe, is the rapture. Yom Kippur is the second coming. And Sukkot is the millennial reign. Okay? I think that's how it's going to work. So those are Moedim. These are just national days of Israel, and they celebrate those. Okay? The Moedim speak of what God does, and these other ones speak of what men did. So there is a difference. Okay? What do I got here? Look at John 10:22. It says, at that time, the Feast of Dedication took place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was walking in the temple courts in Solomon's colonnade. Jesus was celebrating Hanukkah. Okay? So, by the way, I have a talk about this. Jesus was conceived at Hanukkah. It's the Feast of Lights. And if you count being conception at Hanukkah and jump ahead 9 months, you're at Sukkot when he was born. Okay? Hanukkah, by the way, means dedication. Solomon Hanukkah the first temple. Then when they made the second temple, they Hanukkah'd it. Okay? And they celebrate. Hanukkah is a verb. It means to dedicate, right? So Hanukkah's dedication. Purim means lots, or like dice, gambling. Okay? And the symbol of, I don't know if they were dice, but whatever kind of lot they were, there was some kind of thing that, right? And that's kind of, dice would be like the symbol of chance, okay? And, by the way, you know, there's no biblical Hebrew word for coincidence. But look at this story of Esther. We know that Vashti refuses the king. What are the chances? I mean, when the queen is called, she comes. But by coincidence, she chose not to, you know. And then Vashti gets deposed. He could have just forgiven her, but no. Then a Jewish girl ascends the Persian throne. And then Mordecai happens to overhear and reports the assassination plot against the king. Remember, there's no biblical Hebrew word for coincidence. Then Mordecai's deed gets recorded, but not rewarded. Then, for some reason, Haman gets promoted to number 2. There's no coincidence. Then, the random chance, he casts lots. It could have lined up any day, right? That's the ultimate casting of just coincidence. There's the confrontation between Mordecai and Esther. He could have said, you know, you were for such a time as this. And she could have said, well, I'm still not doing it, you know, because it's off with her head if he doesn't put the scepter out. There was the uncertainty whether the king would receive Esther when she went in. The king has insomnia. What are the chances? Okay. Then he asked for something to be read, and of all the volumes, they grabbed the one that had the Mordecai. But there's no such thing as coincidence. And God is not in this book. And then there's the chance that Haman even showed up in the middle of the night, right? Because he said, who's in the court right now? Oh, Haman's in the court. Bring him in here. I mean, there are chances, okay? And then the plot gets reversed. It is, yeah, just remember there's no biblical word for coincidence. And when they say God is not in Esther, well, he's everywhere. So it's kind of interesting that the lots, the symbol of chance, becomes the symbol of anti-chance. Right? Because God, he just pulled whatever strings he needed. Chapter 10, this is a short one. Now, King Xerxes laid a tribute on the land and all the coastlines of the sea, and all the accomplishments of his authority and strength, and the full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles and the kings of Media and Persia? Everybody? For Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and in favor with his many kinsmen, one who sought the good of his people, and one who spoke for the welfare of his whole nation. Those are the 4 verses that everybody reads. By the way, let's go back here to Genesis 14:7. It says, then they turned back and came to En-Mishpat. This is after the Jews left Egypt, right? You probably wonder, how in the world is this tying in? That is Kadesh. And attacked all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. There's the name Amalek. Okay? This is way back in Genesis. Then, I want you to know that the story of Esther actually begins with Esau and Jacob. Really? How does that happen? Watch. This is the first mention of Amalek up here, the Amalekites. But down here is the second mention of Amalek. And it says, and Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare Eliphaz Amalek. And these were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. So remember, Jacob and Esau, Jacob puts the fur on, goes in and gets the blessing. Esau goes in, it's too late, he's missed out. And now there's friction between Esau and Jacob. And Esau ends up marrying, I think, Ishmael's daughter, right? And then he's marrying some other foreigners. He's not at all interested in the promised line. And he marries, Esau has a son named Eliphaz. And Eliphaz marries somebody. And they have Amalek. Oh, by the way, Timnah. Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz. So Timnah's not married. Right? It's an illegitimate child, and they have this Amalek. And who's Amalek's grandfather? Esau, right? So Amalek's going to grow up hearing Esau, that Uncle Jacob. Your uncle, that Jacob, he stole my birthright. That Jacob, he ripped off. Jacob's name's just getting battered and battered. And little Amalek grows up with this hatred toward Jacob and anything Jacob related. Well, if you count from the first ayin in Amalek's name, this was from Genesis 14. Can we go back here? See, I'm going to start right here at this ayin. And we're going to count until the last kof of the second mention of Amalek's name. Understand what I'm doing? Between that first ayin and that kuf, there are 12,110 letters. Big deal. What do you do with that? Well, here's what you do with that. The book of Esther has 12,110 letters. So that's kind of interesting that they match up. But still, how does Amalek tie in with Esther besides the number of letters, right? Well, let's look at a little bit of history of Amalek. He came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. I think this is when Moses had to hold up the staff, and they were holding up his arm, okay? So they're fighting Amalek. Yeah, here, they went up the top of the hill. They held his hand up. Okay, when his hand is up, they were winning. When they put the hand down, Amalek would win. Okay? So that's Amalek showing up there. Moses' hands were heavy, and they held it up. And by the way, it says, thus his hands were steady until the sun set. The word is not steady. The word is amunah. Amunah, we get amen, faithful. His hand was faithful holding that stick up. And here it says, the Lord said to Moses, write this for memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Okay, for he said, because the Lord has sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So there's going to be this onward battle with Amalek. Amalek, remember what Amalek did to you by way of Egypt? Amalek's kind of like the eternal raspberry seed in the Jews' wisdom tooth, right? They just keep showing up and they keep causing problems. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him when he came up from Egypt. Go smite Amalek. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. God told Saul, wipe out all the Amalekites. Okay? And Saul said to Samuel, because they just finished this battle, he was supposed to wipe out every Amalekite and their animals, right? Don't leave anything. And Samuel, the prophet, shows up after the battle, and Saul says to Samuel, yea, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which Yahweh sent me, and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and utterly destroyed the Amalekites. And then remember, Samuel heard some sheep, and Samuel said, what's that sheep bleating I hear? And Saul said, we took their animals so we could sacrifice them to the Lord. Yeah, that's it. We're going to sacrifice them to the Lord. And Samuel said, no, you were supposed to wipe out everything. And who's this guy? And he said, well, that's the king Agag of the Amalekites. We let him live. And Samuel took a sword and cut him into pieces. Okay? So, his name was Agag. Remember that. He was the king of the Amalekites. Look here. Back in chapter 3, when we're introduced to Haman, it says, after these events, King Xerxes promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. That means he's a descendant of Agag. Saul did not destroy every Amalekite. He let Agag live for enough time that he could procreate, and he had Agag. If Saul would have obeyed, there would have been no Haman, son of Agagite, the Agagite, because there would be no Agag. You understand? So Saul's disobedience led to the whole Esther story. And Agag was an Amalekite, and the Amalekite is the grandson of Esau. And Saul said to Samuel, yeah, I have a boy gone the way, and I brought Agag the king. And we already read that. Okay. Now, there was a guy named Shimei. Anybody remember Shimei? He was one of, when David had his 30 mighty men, and they were walking along, and there was some guy up on the hill. Yeah, and Shimei was yelling down at David and insulting him. And one of David's men said, you want me to go up and take off his head, that dog? And David said, no, you know what? If he's supposed to curse me, he's going to curse me. And there's nothing I can do to stop him. If God wants me to be cursed, he's going to curse me. And if I'm not, okay? So David shows mercy to Shimei, right? And then later, whenever I think they're coming into Jerusalem or doing something, Shimei now realizes his mistake. He shouldn't have been ugly to David. And he went and fell on his knees and begged David, please forgive me for all those things I said. And okay. So David said, no, come on, get up. You're okay. Forgave him. David showed mercy. Okay. Now, the reason I tell you that, see here, he threw stones at David. Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. He's saying all these bad things about David. Later, he gets forgiveness. Okay. Yeah, here he said, so let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? If I'm supposed to be cursed, I'm not going to stop him. Let him curse. Okay, we just said all that. Look at the introduction to Mordecai. It says, now there was at the citadel in Susa a Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Mordecai was not son, it's not going to be son. A son, it's like Abraham is the son of Adam. It may not be the direct son, it could be generations, okay? But notice Mordecai is a descendant of Shimei. If David, he's being cursed, and his soldier said, you want me to go take off Shimei's head? David could have said, yes, go take it off. If he would have taken off Shimei's head, there would not be a Mordecai. Saul's disobedience led to Haman. David's mercy led to Mordecai that stopped Haman. And it all started way back with Esau and Jacob. You like? Quick, take up the offering. They like it. We're not done. We're not done. Okay. We have a bonus. Here's something that you may or may not have noticed as we were reading through this, but there is a seeing doubleness in the book of Esther. Watch. In Esther 1:10, he lists the 7 servants, the 7 eunuchs. And then in 1:14, he lists the closest advisors, and there are 7 of those. So, and they're right near each other, but he lists a group of 7 twice. Good. In 2:10, Esther did not reveal that she was Jewish because Mordecai instructed her. And in 2:14, Esther still had not revealed just as Mordecai instructed. So twice, it makes a point of saying she did not reveal her Jewishness. Okay? In 2:8, it says that many young women were gathered at the citadel under Haggai. So they brought all these virgins were gathered. And in 2:19, when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the second city gate. So we have virgins gathered twice. We have in 3:10, the king removes his ring and gives it to Haman. And later in the story, the king removes his ring and gives it to Mordecai. So twice he removes his ring and gives it to somebody. The first time Esther goes in, he puts the golden scepter out and she puts her hand on it. And then in Esther 8:3, once again, Esther goes in, fell at his feet, and he extended the golden scepter. Twice the golden scepter is extended. Okay? Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief. So Haman covers his head. And then in Esther 3:3 and 4, he was falling on the couch. The king, who would actually assault the queen while in the palace, as soon as the words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. So twice Haman covered his head. Isn't this odd that everything that happens in Esther happens twice? Look at this one. Esther 3 and Esther 8. On the 13th day, the royal scribes were summoned. An order was written exactly as Haman commanded. The order was written, and down here, Mordecai wrote. So we have Haman writing and Mordecai writing, and they're writing in the name of King Xerxes. And they seal it with the royal signet ring. And they send the documents by mounted couriers. And a copy of the text was issued to every province and published to all the people so that people could be ready on that day. I mean, it's almost word for word. Everything that happens in Esther happens twice. The king and Haman go to a banquet, and then the king and Haman go to a banquet. That's why she invited him to a banquet, so she could invite him to a banquet, because it has to happen twice. You see? I didn't put it in there, did I? Yep, sorry. Oh, it's probably the same. Oh, yeah, it is. It's Esther 5. So this maybe helps explain why he said, honey, I just killed 500 people in Susa and I hanged Haman's 10 sons. Now, what would you like? Hanged Haman's 10 sons. It's got to happen twice, right? So it's mentioned again. Now, remember those teeny tiny letters and the big letter in the list of 10 Haman's sons? Let me show you here. Here's a vav, and it's a big vav. And then there's 3 little ones, a tav, a shin, and a zayin. A big vav represents 6. And 6 would represent, we're going to use it to represent the millennium. Okay, the 6th millennium. Now remember, the first millennium goes from the year 0 to 1,000. And then 1,000 to 2,000 is the second. 2 to 3 is the third. 3 to 4 is the fourth. 4 to 5 is the fifth. The 6th would begin 5,000 something, right? The year. So we're in the 6th millennium now. So, and those little numbers, the little ones, A Tav is 400, a Shin is 300, and a Zayin is 7, which those three little ones add up to 707. So if you put the big one and the little ones together, it comes to, whoop, get back, where are you? Oh. It comes to the year 5000, that's the Vav, 707. And that year on our Gregorian calendar is 1946. Well, that's kind of interesting that if those big and little letters even mean years, you know, I don't know if it does, but I do know it does. You'll see. I read the end of the book here. Okay, so that's 1946. Look at this. On the 21st day of Tishri, in the year 5707, which is October 16th, 1946, it's the last day of Sukkot. Do you wonder why we did Esther today? There was a Nazi corroborator, Julius Streicher. He was hanged with 9 other German officers found guilty at the Nuremberg trials. Okay? This Julius Streicher, he wasn't a Nazi soldier. He was a newspaper man. And he started back in the early 20s writing poison articles about the Jews. The Jews are causing all of our problems. And Hitler liked his stuff, and they kept writing and writing, and he got all the German people stirred up against the Jews, so they hated the Jews. Okay? And he did it for so long that they made him, they tried him at the Nuremberg trials. Okay? Because he was one of the corroborators who caused all this problem against the Jews. Part of his sentence read, for his 25 years of speaking, writing, preaching hatred of the Jews, Streicher was widely known as Jew baiter number 1. In his speeches and articles week after week, month after month, he infected the German mind with the virus of anti-Semitism and incited the German people to active persecution. Streicher's incitement to murder and extermination at a time when Jews in the East were being killed under the most horrible conditions clearly constitutes persecution on political and racial grounds in connection with war crimes as defined by the Charter and constitutes a crime against humanity. So there was supposed to be 11 were going to be killed that day, hanged, because they were all tried. One of them was Goering. You know, Hermann Goering, he was the head of the Luftwaffe. And he was going to be killed that day. And when they went to his cell that morning, somehow he had a cyanide pill, and he had taken it, and he was dead. So they didn't hang 11 that day. They only hanged 10. Now, isn't it interesting that in the Esther story, you've got Haman's 10 sons listed with these little and small and big letters, right? Which point to 1946. And then you have the king saying to Esther, hey, I just hanged Haman's 10 sons. What do you want? I want Haman's 10 sons, those who persecute the Jews, I want them hanged. Oh, is it referring to the future? It very well could be. You know, it's just, God knows the future. We saw the one with Rambam. He knew the future. This is not a stretch. And here's one more that shows up twice. In Esther 9:1, the whole story, it turned out to the contrary, so that the Jews themselves gained mastery over all who hated them. So something turned, and that's the word hafak, and it's to turn upside down. And that's Esther 9:1. In 9:22, it also has it again. It was the month which was turned for them from grief to joy, mourning to holiday. It's the same. This word is only used twice in Esther, okay? And it's to turn upside down. And we've been seeing all these, that two things, they double, right? There's two of everything. Okay, oh, another bonus. Can you believe it's the last night? And we're going to get out by 9 o'clock. We're going to make the Green Acres Marathon. Okay. Years ago, I may have told you I thought I'm going to rewrite the Bible in poetry, which is like, what are you thinking? But I got about half of it done. I never finished it. And some are good, some are bad. And here is my Esther poem. And we threw in some famous art in the meantime. And it's a little bit loose here with the scripture, so just go with this. Okay, here we go. Xerxes told his clerks he's going to throw a banquet ball. To display wealth of his kingdom, all his gardens, jewels ring them, and to all the people bring them food and wine for one and all. Vashti, acting rashly, ignored her husband Xerxes' call. Since she did not give a reason, Xerxes thinks it's act of treason. Wise men tell the king that she's on thin ice, time for her downfall. Young girls, search among worlds that I own for my new queen. Oh, this is the one I didn't copy this stanza correctly, so we can't read the rest of this one. No, I didn't have the right verse in there. I've doubled the second verse into the third. I didn't copy it right, so you're going to just see the same thing you saw in the second. But the rest of the poem's going good. And I don't have the poem with me in my computer. It's at home in a book that I had written. Next one. So the young girls, search among worlds. He picked her. Esther is the best for Xerxes, who says, I choose you. Mordecai, who's Esther's cousin, tells her maybe, since she wasn't, king's religion that she mustn't tell the king that she's a Jew. Gatemen, one night late when no one's round, plot king must die. Mordecai, who's sitting near them, accidentally overhears them, tells Queen Esther, who then steers them to the king who hangs them high. There he is overhearing, you can see. Haman, to whom King Haman honored with royal decree. All the citizens must bow to Haman, but no way, no how, to day or pass are Jews allowed to, so Mordecai would not bend knee. Jealous, hate as well as spite makes Haman seethe for sure. He tells king it's very urgent that we kill each Jew insurgent, and to pick a date to purge went out and cast a lot or purr. Warning, Jews start mourning when they hear of coming fate. And to mourn, as was the fashion, Mordecai put sackcloth sash on, sat and wailed in pile of ash on other side of city gate. Fasting, 3 days lasting, Jews conform to Esther's wish. Before Xerxes, she proceeds to go and tell him that she needs to ask a favor, and she pleads to him in hopes she won't perish. Xerxes says the perk she's worthy of is half his all. She tells king she won't now say more, but if he will wait one day more, she'll prepare a nice buffet for him and Haman when they call. Huh? Haman still the same and feeling good with hand he's dealt. Walking home, he sees Jew who sits, still unbending, sets off new fits. This Jew will hang 50 cubits, so he has a gallows built. Xerxes jumps and jerks. He's wide awake, can't get shut eye. He leaves through a history book then and sees risk that one man took when gate men turned out to be crook men, thinks to honor Mordecai. Haman, called by name, and comes with hanging news for king. Xerxes asks if Haman's knowing of best way for honor showing. Haman's answer keeps on going, thinking he's to get each thing. Xerxes sets in works these things that Haman said to do. When Haman learned that Mordecai'd get all these things, he's mortified yet. The honor that the court applied set Haman's grief and his wife's too. Esther, the king requests her, what can I do for my queen? She entreats, if I found favor with you, all my people save for, were they sent to early graves, your wife, a Jew, would not be seen. Xerxes goes berserk, sees he must find who do such thing. Esther points to Haman vile, king storms out to garden while, Haman pleads for fair man's trial, hang him high, declares the king. Esther, you can rest your worried mind, proclaims Xerxes. The evil plan toward Jews I'll stay and give to you the wealth of Haman. For Mordecai, new royal raiment, Haman's sons, I'll hang all these. Purim, now a forum day recalling the Jews' plight. Jews observe this day because Lot turned the tables of what was plot to kill Jews, and Esther was not scared to speak for what was right. Okay, I'll get right on that. I used it tonight. It's 20 years old. 20 years ago I wrote that. Yeah. So, okay, look, we're out before 9 o'clock. Well, this concludes our 8 days. And now I'm going to go home and start preparing another 8 lessons for next year. If you will have me. But I'm so honored and it's just very nice that you guys do have me come every year. You don't actually invite me. I just say, I'll see you next year. What? Open invitation. Okay. So, on my YouTube, John Kostick, I've got almost 100 videos out now, and maybe some of you have watched them. But what you're seeing here, there's lots of topics. We go through the whole alphabet. We do about an hour on every letter of the alphabet. There's 22 videos. We do Joseph, Moses. I mean, there's just heaps and heaps of videos. So have a look at those if you have time. And again, just thank you so much for getting it. It's nice when people get it, because there's something to be gotten. And it's no fun when you're trying to tell somebody and they're like, So anyway, let's do a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all out tonight to hear about this Esther story and all the cool things that you have hidden in there, including yourself. And we just ask that you bring us all back safely next year. And again, just thank you. And happy Sukkot. And may there be peace in Jerusalem. In Yeshua Jesus' precious name, amen.